Welcome to the 2019 Meet the Candidates Night, hosted by the Norfolk Community League. I'm Kelly Panapinto, so I'm the current president of NCL, and I'm here along with my co-hospitality chairs, Debbie Haltom and Bridget Bishop, who, they are the reason we're here tonight. So they're our organizers, our event planners, so I can't thank them enough for putting this together for us. Thank you all of you for being here this evening and taking time away from work, from home. I know it's a busy time of year, and I hope you'll find the event to be very informative. Another thank you to all of our candidates who are here to participate in the forum this evening. I know that they'll give us a lot of great information to help us be more educated voters. Special thank you also to Jay Talman, who is our moderator this evening and will be fielding all of our questions. If you guys know anybody that could not attend this evening but would want to hear about this evening, we also have NCTV here recording the session. It'll be available within the next few days on our local channel as well as through YouTube. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Jay.
Good evening. My name is Jay Tallerman. I am the town's moderator. I'm also running for re-election this year, thankfully unopposed, unlike some of the folks to my right. So if you have questions for me as well, then feel free to ask them. The candidates, all of them, there's only, I believe, just 2 contested races, but the candidates for all positions are available to answer your questions. And so please keep them coming and we'll get them up here. I have a bunch already that I'm sifting through. What we're going to start with is some opening statements. For folks that are running unopposed, I'm not pressuring you to do an opening statement. If you want to, you may. Why don't we start with the folks who are running for positions other than selectmen, and we'll give you about 3 minutes or so. 3 to 4 minutes. I'm not going to be super strict on time today, but I will try and keep you close to that, so try and keep yourself close to that. We'll do the same for answering questions, 3 minutes or so. I may do some follow-up questions. I'm getting a lot of similar questions for various candidates. I tend to kind of combine them into one shot at that particular subject area so that most of it gets represented. I may also ask an occasional follow-up. As you can imagine, most of, in fact, all the questions so far are for the selectmen candidates. So, but if you have other questions, please feel free to answer them. So, without further ado, we can start on the end and work our way forward and see how it goes.
Thank you, Joe. And I'd also like to thank the Norfolk Community League. Good evening, everyone. I'm Gary Searle. I'm running for a position on the planning board. My wife Eileen and I have lived in the town about 24 years. In my profession, in my background, I'm a mechanical engineer. I have a bachelor's degree from Roger Williams University in Rhode Island, and my master's is from Worcester Tech. I've worked in several industries where I've built and led teams primarily focused on bringing new technology to the marketplace. I've made many technical contributions, and I've also done a lot of planning and execution end-to-end on programs. I hope some of my skills are transferable to this position on the planning board. I've also, in my personal and professional life, I've been involved in some construction projects. I've worked with architects and contractors. We've built a residence. I also renovated and built 3 commercial buildings in the city of Boston. My 24 years as a Norfolk resident, I've watched the town grow at a moderate rate, and I've always been interested and passionate about participating in the process to ensure that future growth is in conformance with the policies and the bylaws that we have in place. Last May, I accepted a position as an associate planning board member. It's a non-voting position. This time I'm running as a full member. You will vote for me. And I also participate on the Medical Reserve Corps, the MRC, and I've been volunteering on the MRC for about 10 years as well. I'm running unopposed for this position, but I wish that was not the case. I wish that more people would participate in community, share their opinion, and work collectively with other citizens to make improvements in the town. I thank you all for being here tonight and bringing your voice to this conversation. And again, I hope you'll vote for me. Thanks.
So I can see what I wrote earlier today. Thank you, Jay, and the Norfolk Community League for the opportunity to introduce myself as a candidate for the Board of Health. My name is Eileen Siegel, and my husband Gary and I have lived in town since 1995, which I understand still makes us newcomers. I've been practicing veterinary medicine for 32 years, and I have a special interest in disaster preparedness. I'm a member of the state of Massachusetts Animal Response Team, which was formed after Hurricane Katrina resulted in the federal pets evacuation and transportation standards of 2006 that ensured that state and local emergency preparedness plans address the needs of people with pets and service animals following a disaster. I have served on the Massachusetts Veterinary Medical Association as the chair of the Emergency and Disaster Preparedness Committee, and then I served as president-elect, president, and then past president for a total of 6 years. I also volunteer for the Medical Reserve Corps, which is a national network of locally based medical and non-medical volunteers who contribute to local health initiatives such as vaccine clinics, emergency sheltering, and mass dispensing sites. I've organized the Volunteer Fair for the past 2 years, bringing volunteer-based organizations such as the Norfolk Community League in Norfolk together to showcase the many ways people can get involved with the community. So both my husband and I are strong volunteers in the community. My motto is step up or step aside. You have to get out there and do some good things for your neighbors. I feel that my experience will serve as a good background for joining the Board of Health. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Walter Byron?
Jay, could you turn up that microphone with me? It's hard to hear.
Sure, let me see if I can do that.
I think they just have to adjust it.
It has nothing to do with that, sir. I'm calling it from back here. I gotta be a little careful about how high I get because it starts to feedback very quickly. So I will ask each of the candidates, please speak directly into the microphone.
Good evening, my name is Walter Byron. I'm a candidate for re-election to the planning board. This is my 51st year in town, moved in 1968. My wife Barbara and I raised our 3 children here. They went to the Norfolk schools and the KP system and did very well, I'd add. My background is I grew up in Waltham. I went to Tufts and earned my engineering degree there, mechanical engineering. I did a couple of years in Uncle Sam's Navy as a junior officer on a destroyer. When I came out of the service, I went to grad school and did my graduate work at Northeastern University in engineering. Then I had a 33-year career with Polaroid Corporation in camera manufacturing and camera product development. I'm running to encourage development in the business and commercial districts we have in town. I seek a balanced approach to development that retains the rural character of the town, but enhances the service to the community that the tax revenue from those businesses and retail operations provide. Speaking of tax revenue, 93% of our tax revenue in town comes from residences and 7% from commercial and industrial properties. And while that 7% seems to be a small number, not too long ago it was only 5%. So we've got a ways to go. I'd like to see it to be 90-10. We need more business and commercial tax revenue to hold down the residential tax increases in the future. In the past, I've served in other capacities in town. In the 70s, I was on the school committee for 1 term. I served 3 years on the master plan committee, back ending in 07. I served 5 years in economic development committee, and then more recently, 6 years on the planning board. So to sum up quickly, the opportunity to serve again on the planning board will afford me the chance to help bring in more badly needed business and commercial tax revenue to assist in keeping future residential tax increases as low as possible. I want to thank you all for being here this evening, and I ask for the vote for the citizens of Norfolk. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay and NCL. Good evening, everyone. My name is Chad Peck, and I'm running for planning board. My wife, Alice, and I recently moved here just 2 years ago, so if Gary is new at 20 years, I'm just an infant here in this town. We do think it's a great town, and we're looking to become more established and involved into the community here. Currently have 2 children, Sophie, who is 12, who is a student at Freeman Kennedy, and I have another son who is 14, who is a student at KP Middle. I'm a civil engineer, partner in a civil engineering firm, where I currently oversee the IT operations of that firm. I've held many roles in that firm, but I'm currently overseeing IT. I'm running for planning board, and I'm looking for your vote. Thank you.
Stiff. Hi, my name is Debbie Robbins, and I'm running for Board of Assessors. I guess everyone's saying how long they've been in town. I was born in Norfolk. I've lived here my entire life. Went through the Norfolk school system and the King Philip school system. I was the chief assessor for the town of Norfolk for 13 years. And then I went over to Westwood and I was their chief assessor for 14 years. I recently retired in December, and I'm just looking to keep my mind active in the field. And this is I'm running unopposed, which I find that hard to believe, but I just felt that, it's an important position, and I would like to keep it going, and I would like your vote. Thank you.
Thanks. Just a reminder, if you have questions, you can give them up front here, and then they'll get them up to me. Jackie, you want to go first?
Hi, my name is Jackie Katz. Is that loud enough? Can everyone hear me? I see nods in the back. Okay. My background is I went to Tufts for my master's program. That's how I ended up in Massachusetts. I'm from New York originally, but I'm a Pats fan, so everything's okay. Thank you. Yes. When my husband and I were looking for homes, I've been working at Wellesley High School for over a decade now. I'm a high school history teacher. I teach AP US history and world history, 9th grade and 11th grade. And we were looking for our first home. We really fell in love with this town. We came in across the railroad tracks in the center of town, and I said, oh, there's no stoplight. This is awesome. And we found a house that abuts Stony Brook on the backside. And every other town, I could see my neighbors doing their dishes. So Norfolk was really a dream come true for us when we bought our first home here. And over the past few years, we really fell in love with the town and really see ourselves here long term. And I just had a baby. I have like 4,000 pictures if anyone wants to see a picture of him on my phone. But we just had a child, and we really think that this is a great community to raise him in. And so I'm running largely because my whole life I've been in public service. So I'm a public school teacher, and I ran for state senate. I lost in the primary last September, so you might recognize my name or my face because I was posting on Facebook, and you might have seen my baby. I was carrying around my 5-month-old the entire time I was canvassing. It was very heavy, and now he's very heavy. So I really liked meeting people in our town, and I probably spent way too much time in the town because I really liked everyone I was meeting. It was really friendly. People had a lot of concerns. This was the only town where people invited me in for coffee and pumpkin bread and cake. Only town. And I traveled across an entire district, and this was the only town where people were welcoming me into their homes and having long conversations. And after talking to about 400 people canvassing in Norfolk, after losing the race, I really still felt like I wanted to help our town and represent our town. So when there was an opportunity for a selectman's position, I thought this might be something I want to do. I thought it over, talked to my husband, and I really want to just represent our voices. And I really think that our town has a lot of great qualities, and for me, it's the rural community that keeps me here and where I'm really excited to raise my son, and I'd like to keep that character. And as a teacher, as a mom, I really think about kids first. And so for me, it's about what's best for our kids when I think about a lot of decisions. So I'm running for the 1-year term. I know it's confusing because nobody's signs actually say which term we're running for, but I'm Jackie Katz running for the 1-year term. Thank you so much.
Good evening. I have notes, not a beautifully prepared speech, so because I have a tendency to go off piste and not do my beautifully prepared speech. So I thought I'd try bullet points and we'll see how that works. My name is Cece Van Tine and I live in Norfolk at 11 Wright Farm Road. I have 4 children. They range in age from William, who is in 5th grade at Freeman Kennedy, Jack in 7th, Emma in 8th, and Caroline, who is she's a junior, but it's called a second classman at the United States Naval Academy. And I am a divorce attorney. I'm a partner at a law firm in Boston known as Burns & Levinson. My journey of public service in the town of Norfolk began when I saw a notice on, there used to be the Norfolk Net. I don't know if you all remember that, which people would just flame each other out, get so angry and just nasty, 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 ha! Send, and then maybe regret it. And maybe I might have done that myself. So on Norfolk Net, they were looking for somebody for Prison Advisory Fund, or a position for the Prison Advisory Committee. And what that was to deal with the prison mitigation money. And so I went and I applied, and in fact, the Board of Selectmen at that time included Mr. Lehan. And I got the position. And then I met Dan Winslow, and Dan Winslow was the moderator at the time, and he appointed me to the advisory committee. And I was on advisory. And then when Dan left, I ran in a contested race for moderator and was pleased to win that position, and I was moderator. Subsequent to that, I have been on the Board of Assessors. In addition, I was on the board of NCL in the fundraising role, co-chair. I'm not sure if my cohort is here from that year, but that was a fun year. I believe in service, and I'm running for the 3-year position, not to be confused with the 1-year position. I'm not running against Jackie. And I pulled only for the 3-year position when I saw that it was open. And the reason that I'm running is twofold, really. But ultimately, it's because in my mind, we have no plan. We have, if you were to look back at 2004 and you were to take a house, say the house was valued at $500,000, and say that house was taxed at $5,000 per year. And obviously these are faux numbers because I'm not a math guy. This year, the same house, same value would be $10,000. From 2004 to today, our tax rate, our real estate tax rate has doubled. And at the same time as our tax rate has doubled, our services have declined. One would think that with the amount that we pay in taxes, comparable or higher to surrounding communities like Sherburne and Dover, we would have smooth roads, no problem painting our library, no issues with money. And every day when I'm running on the roads and every day when I'm cycling on the roads, I'm reminded that we have a spending problem where we keep taxing and we keep spending, and we're not mindful of the fact that at the end of the day, you and I have to pay that bill, and we don't have a plan. And so one of the reasons I'm running is because I feel that the spending has been out of control, and that there's a way to calm it down, keep more money in the townspeople's pockets as well, but at the same time get the important things done. Make sure the schools are taken care of, the library is taken care of, the roads are taken care of. In addition, I have an issue with transparency. It's been my sense, and I'm not alone, that there are things that go on behind the scenes at Town Hall, and that needs to stop. Some of it is easily solved, putting the budget online. Some of it is a little more difficult. But those are the 2 primary reasons that I'm running. Thank you. Almost curtsy.
Good evening, Christopher Weeder. I've lived in town for 22 years, and I've worked for Norfolk for 25 years. I raised my son here. He went through the Norfolk school system and through the King Philip school system. Went to UMass Amherst and now works in TV out in Springfield. I don't know who cried more the first day of kindergarten, him or I. I look at Norfolk. My background is I'm the general manager of Aqua Berries Incorporated. It's a commercial roofing company here in Norfolk. Been here for 30 years. I've worked there for 25 years as its general manager. I'm also the chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals here in Norfolk, where I've served for 9 years. I also am Norfolk's animal inspector, and I'm the animal control officer and animal inspector for both the towns of Rentham and Plainville. So I have a unique opportunity just to see 3 town governments in operation. I look at a municipal government very similar to a business. A business has a president, has a CFO, and it has a board of directors at the top. I look at our selectmen as our board of directors. The board of selectmen in a corporation are to maximize shareholder profits. I believe our responsibility as selectmen is to maximize the citizens of Norfolk. You are our shareholders, everybody up here, everybody out there. The selectmen's job is to make sure we protect our shareholders, which are you, the residents, to make sure that our bylaws are followed, and to make sure we continue to grow in an appropriate manner. Norfolk has a lot of issues as we move forward. As Cece mentioned, our tax rate has doubled in the last 10 years. It is driving some people out of town. The elderly who built this town, if you look at a number of the pictures in town, you'll see them. They were the people who painted the old fire station and the old town hall. They no longer can afford to live here. We can't let that continue. We have to get our tax rate in order, which means good budgeting decisions and strong budgeting decisions. Not every one will be popular, but we have to make sure we keep our budget in check. That is the job of the selectmen. We have to look at our infrastructure. We have an issue with water. As most of you now know, our water bills will be going up 24% next year. We still only have 2 wells. And if everybody in town signed up for water, we could not provide it. We are bringing a 3rd well on board on Holbrook Street, but we also have to look for other opportunities. What most of you don't know is the state school in Rentham is supplied by a well up by our Spruce Street well. It is solely for the purpose of the state school. If we work with the state, there's a good chance we could actually take over the control of that well, which sits right next to our well within 1,700 feet. We could supply water to the state school and have a backup well for Norfolk. The problem could be is, say the state school closes and that property is developed, that well being so close to the proximity of our well could actually cause that well to decline. We have to look at other areas of infrastructure. We've heard tonight that we have to build our commercial base. Building our commercial base will not change our tax rate. But most of you, over the last 20 years, in every census, in every town forum, say you'd like a sense of community, have a restaurant, have the center of town be developed more for all of you. The only way we do that is to develop our infrastructure. We need to make sure that we have a stormwater system that's appropriate. We have to make sure that we have a sewer or a water treatment plant that's appropriate for the center. And we need people. Without those 3 elements, 10-foot sidewalks, pretty trees, park benches, will not develop our center of town. We also have to be conscious of what's going on with our capital expenditures. We now will see in the next couple of weeks our police and our MEC center will open up. It is over budget and behind schedule. Because of that, our fire station rebuild, renovation is in jeopardy. We cannot let that happen again. We have got to manage our capital projects and have the right people doing that. To do these things, we need leadership, we need knowledge of the town, and we need hard work. I'm prepared to do all those things. I ask for your vote on May 7th. I am running for the one-year term for the office of Selectman. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is David Rosenberg. I'd like to thank you all for coming here this evening. I'd like to thank NCL for organizing and hosting this event, and I certainly want to thank all the candidates for the various offices for their running for office and for being here this evening. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my background, a little bit about why I'm offering my services as a selectman to the town, and a little bit about how I see the role of selectman. I'm now a retired computer professional. I have lived and worked in Massachusetts since 1972. My wife and I moved to Norfolk in 1978, so we've been living here for just over 40 years. I've served the town of Norfolk as a member of the Computer Study Committee in 1997 through 1999. I was the chair of the Norfolk Town Meeting Technology Committee, and I'm currently a member of the Norfolk Board of Registrars of Voters. I studied electrical engineering at Cornell and mathematics at NYU. My professional career has been in the computer field. I've worked in commercial companies, educational institutions, and ran my own consulting company. During the time that I worked at MIT, I was trained as a mediator to mediate student disputes. That sparked my interest in mediation and negotiation, and I've pursued those interests both while I worked at MIT and subsequently. I believe that my mediation and negotiation skills will be useful if I'm elected as a selectman. I've attended selectmen's meetings particularly recently, observed the work that they do, and discussed their work with Norfolk selectmen and with people who have served as selectmen in other towns. I've spoken with current selectmen and a number of town officials about issues facing the town. I realize that being a fully engaged selectman requires a very significant time commitment and entails a great deal of work. I think we all owe the current, retiring, and former selectmen a debt of gratitude for the work that they've put in for the town. I'm now retired and able to commit to the extensive hours and effort that I know will be required as a selectman. I'm running for the 3-year term. There is another candidate running for the 3-year term for selectmen, but I don't feel I'm running against anyone. I'm offering my services to the town since I'm now in a position where I can commit all the time and energy to do the job to the best of my ability. I feel that the job of selectmen is to give the residents of Norfolk the town that they want, subject to the constraints under which the town must operate. I'm an advocate for citizen engagement involving Norfolk residents in town decision-making. I know that I don't know all the answers, and I'm very willing to admit what I don't know and to ask lots of questions. I want to rely on the accumulated knowledge, experience, and wisdom of townspeople to guide the evolution of Norfolk. People generally want more and better services and lower taxes. Those desires are in tension with each other, but I have 2 suggestions. By involving townspeople in town decision-making, the citizens of Norfolk can be involved in making the trade-offs between what services they want and what they're willing to pay for them. Also, the people closest to the front line of service delivery have the clearest understanding of what services they are delivering, where there is any waste, and what changes can be made to improve services and lower costs. Other organizations have flattened their hierarchies and allowed teams to self-organize and be self-directed in order to provide the best services as inexpensively as possible. I'm interested in exploring an experiment like that as a small trial in Norfolk to see if we can leverage the knowledge and expertise of town employees to deliver more and better services at lower cost. I'll also mention that I have been a reasonably regular attendee at the meetings of the Town Government Study Committee and have been monitoring their discussions. I think they have a number of good ideas. I'm, as I said, interested in working to engage citizens in town decision-making. A while ago, when I was running for the position of town moderator, I was collecting suggestions for how that might be done. That is, what we could do to, what the suggestions were that people had for engaging in town government. And I collected them on a website that is still available. Those are also things that I would go back and look at. And if I'm not elected as a selectman, I hope the board that is elected will look at those for ways to engage citizens in town decision-making. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, so I have a number of questions here that have been collected. There's likely going to be a few more. And we're going to vary the order a little bit. And there's going to be some follow-up questions that are, because there's been like several key groups and then some specific focus for some of the candidates. So I might tap you on the shoulder and let you know that I have a follow-up question for you. Again, keep it to about 3 minutes or so. I'm not going to be super strict on time if you're in the middle of a really good thought that I think everyone needs to hear. But let's start with this, and we're going to start with Chris. As the architects of the town's budget, what is your approach to balancing taxes with such items as education, open space, road repairs, municipal salaries, and the like? Chris?
I am a fan of zero-based budgeting. Every department, every project will have to be justified. Every position will have to be justified. So whether or not it's education, open space, or capital improvements, the only way I see, like we all do in our own homes, is to justify the cost, to look at the need, and to also get the input of the residents. If people want something, we have to figure out what the cost of it is, and that's how we'll develop our budget around it. Thank you.
Chris, don't go anywhere. Sorry, we're getting right out of the gate. So let me just jump in here a little bit. You mentioned in your opening remarks that you'd have to make some tough decisions, and that there's tough decisions to be made on funding things. Do you have any examples here tonight for what you think a tough decision would be, and what decision you'd make in that regard?
No, thank you. No. I think it would be premature. I am not a selectman. I can give you examples with regard to zoning board, but I think as selectman, you have to look at the budget. You have to understand the budget. So in order to say, what would I cut, what wouldn't I cut, what would I approve, I think until you become a selectman, you look at the budget, you talk to the departments that are presenting items before you, then you make that decision. I do not have, one of the advantages to being on the zoning board is you use the zoning bylaws, use the facts of the case to determine your outcomes. It works in most cases, and I don't think you can make any budget decisions without knowing those facts first and then make a decision.
Okay. Great, thank you. Jackie, same question to you. I'll reread the question. As architects of the town's budget, what is your approach to balancing taxes with such items as education, open space, road repairs, municipal salaries, and the like?
So as a public employee and school teacher, I'm really used to understanding that you have to use everything that you need. And sometimes there are moments where we can save money. We have the worst loose leaf at my school. It rips when you write on it. It's fine for the purpose that it has. So I think where I come to this is with a real common sense approach. So what do we need the best quality stuff for? Where can we cut some corners? I think that's an approach that makes sense in my classroom, that makes sense in my district, and that's an attitude that I would bring, is that there are moments where we can handle less, and then there are things that are really important that we need the best. And I'm just going to agree with my opponent. I know that doesn't help you at all decide who to vote for, but I agree that with 2 new people coming onto the select board, there is going to be a learning curve for the entire board to get on the same page, to give the select board time to look at the budget. I really like David's idea, and I had also thought about just audit to see where are we spending the money in our municipal government, and where can we find some cuts. And if there are no cuts and we're working as efficiently as possible, that's amazing. And I think that that's something that is probably unlikely just based on how governments work. So I don't think there's anyone up here that's going to say we don't want our government to be running as efficiently as possible. But I think it has to do with first knowing the facts and understanding where our money is going, and then deciding what is most important to us to spend money on and where we can cut some corners.
Mr. Rosenberg, same question to you. Do you need me to read it back?
No, I think that it is not appropriate for the Board of Selectmen itself to make these decisions for the town. I think that the townspeople need to be involved in making the decisions, and there are clearly trade-offs. Things cost money, and money needs to come from the citizens, and therefore I would like to convene the citizens of Norfolk to prioritize what they think needs to be done, and to allocate the amount of money that they're willing to spend for those things. Thank you.
Ms. Van Tonne, do you need the question read back?
You'll tell me if I got it wrong. So all the good answers were taken, but here's my thinking. And it dovetails, I think, with what Mr. Rosenberg just said. And it also dovetails with what I said in my opening remarks about transparency. Right now, we have a $40 million budget, and most people will see it on town meeting night, right? And then they're asked to sort of weigh in, what do you think of this tranche? What do you think of that tranche? And that's just not the way to do it, in my opinion. And I understand that it requires the townspeople getting more involved earlier in the process, but I think it's an easy enough fix for us, if I'm lucky enough to be elected to the Board of Selectmen, to let people know where we are at in the budget process, what it is we are talking about, what it would mean for a particular line item if we fund it in a particular way in terms of less money being allocated for other things. And in addition, I think this dovetails with the issue that I had regarding spending. I agree with Jackie. See, everybody, I agree with everybody. I agree with Jackie that it is unlikely that we are completely dialed in with our budget. We're not. Everybody looks at it. Everybody knows. And the things that are, in my opinion, as a parent and a townsperson, important are the schools, the library, the roads. And I think that they need more attention. And then to agree with Chris, right, my last person to agree with, some of that, sort of the secondary question that was asked, well, what would you cut? Well, you need to meet with the different boards, right? We'd need to meet with the library board. They're who decides how they spend their budget. They come to the Board of Selectmen with what they need, and you meet with the school committee and the KP school committee, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think that we have enough information, any of us, tonight to point to a particular line item in a budget that I haven't seen yet. But I can say that in the future, I should be able to say as just an average person, I've seen early workings. I know it's February. I know what we're talking about in terms of where the budgeting is going and why. You get it? Can I go back to my thing?
You may. Good job. She even covered my proposed follow-up, so that is good. Okay, next question, and this, we're probably going to do this one in two different questions, and this is for all of the candidates. What are your positions on residential development, on commercial development, and what, as a select person, would you do to influence your proposed position on that? And we will start with Mr. Rosenberg.
Probably not surprisingly, my answer to this is almost identical to my answer to the previous question. That is that I want to know what the people of Norfolk want. I would, at the last annual town meeting, I had a proposal for town participation in making budget recommendations. I would like to implement something so that the townspeople, in fact, are the ones who make the recommendations, and then the advisory board will make their recommendations about the recommendations from the townspeople, and the selectmen will propose the actual budget. Thank you.
Go back to Ms. Van Tine on the same question. Do you need a red back? Sure. What are your positions on residential development, on commercial development, and what, as a select person, would you do to influence those positions?
Harkening back to my opening statements again, I talked about the fact that I thought that we didn't have a plan. It feels to me like we don't have a plan. I note that one of the ways we can avoid hostile 40B, which is residential, is to have the appropriate amount of low-income housing already in the town. So we don't. And so every year we're faced with hostile 40B. I believe in growth if it's careful growth. I believe in commercial development because it offsets the real estate taxes that the individuals incur. But what I would do, so I like residential and I like commercial. I don't like hostile 40B. While I believe in low income and mixed use housing, I don't like the idea that someone can come in and force all of the neighbors' hands. And so what I would do is impose on people to really work on getting the 10%, I think it is, that is necessary of low-income housing to prevent the hostile 40B.
Very good. Ms. Katz?
So I'll just transition because I agree with her points on 40B, and I think that when we think about all new residential development, we have to be thinking about that we're making progress toward 40B, and that's how a lot of towns around Massachusetts have handled 40B. It's not going to get us to the 10%, of course, but all new housing developments that go in have to have equal or more housing developments going in for 40B. That's the only way we're going to ever get to that 10% number, and I know it seems really far away, but there are towns that are successful at this, and I believe that we can do this with a plan. As for commercial development, I thought Novatos and Eaglebrook were the places that we went to hang out. I like that in town there aren't a ton of cars coming through all the time. I walk there with my son because I live on North Street, so we walk through town. And when I was canvassing on Seekonk Street in Needham this last summer, every person before I left, I'm not joking, said, do not back onto that road. People go way too fast. And every house had to turn around because people were driving really fast in town, and I just don't want to see more increased traffic in our town center. I think part of why I moved to Norfolk and what I love about this town is it does have everything I need. And when I need more stuff, I have like 65 towns around me that I can go to. So I think that while I understand the desire for more income coming from commercial properties, I really think that we need to hold on to our town center. And while I'd be very interested for people to share what businesses they'd like to see in town, I think there needs to be a real discussion with residents of, is this a business we really need in town? And why do you need this business in town? And having a 15-month-old and having to run out to get milk every 3 days, which nobody told me about, it's great to have Walgreens in town. And that's been where I've been going to get our groceries when we're in a pinch. So I do think that commercial development can be good, but I think that in terms of keeping the character of our town, I really like how our center doesn't have tons of cars going to, I don't want it to be like Foxborough or Patriots Place. I like how our center of town feels. I like how cars aren't zooming by and I can actually walk with my son and feel safe on our sidewalks. I've been walking to the playground and it's been really great. But in terms of using my position to influence this, This board is representing you. So it's about what you want. So I think that all of us up here are committed to hearing your viewpoints, and the question kind of implied that I use my position to try and convince people. I think it's about representing what you want, and what I just talked about is something that I heard from a lot of people when I was canvassing last summer. So it's not my own only personal viewpoint, it's something that I heard from a lot of people. Thank you.
Chris?
I'll first tackle the commercial element. Most of the people in all the censuses over the last 20 years have said they'd like to see a little more commercial development, especially a restaurant in the center of our town. If that's the case, as I mentioned earlier, we have to develop our infrastructure. As far as other commercial development, we do want to balance the commercial development. It does help our taxes slightly. Being that we are, I think, 93% residential tax, 7% commercially taxed, it's not going to make a large effect on it. But we do have a commercial zone in town. We do have a business zone in town. We can work with them, and if we do work with them, we can get a small element of commercial development in town. A number of people coming to Norfolk complain that it's too onerous to do any kind of business with the town of Norfolk. That has to change. With regard to residential development, we are at about 5% right now towards that 10% goal. In 2020, there'll be a new census. With all the housing that has gone on since the last census, that number will go up and will drop actually to only be somewhere in the 4% range towards our 10% goal. Will the town of Norfolk ever reach 10%? Not unless we do like Medfield, Rentham, and Plainville and start building apartments. Look around Route 1. Rentham has met their 10% by building apartments. Plainville has done the same thing. Medfield, as you drive through it, down Dover Road, the exact same thing. That's how they're achieving our 10%. I do not think the people in Norfolk want to go to that level. So it'll be very difficult to reach 10%. 40Bs, whether you want to call them antagonistic or unfriendly or friendly, they're a fact of life. If you have enough acreage, a developer can come in and try to develop a 40B. The goal of the town should not be looking towards that 10%, but to make sure these developments fit into our town. And that's the most important thing the zoning board has to do. We can't just deny them, because it sets the clock back. It does not help the town. It is to the benefit of this community when these 40Bs to come in, work with them, and get the best we can get for the taxpayers of this town. We need other growth. We obviously need subdivisions, we need small growth. But we will never get to that 10% of affordable housing in town of Norfolk. We don't have land on Route 1. Other than Southwood, and even if you built out Southwood, we probably would not have enough to reach that 10%. We do need growth, but we do need to manage it, and we do need to look at our commercial element in the center of town if that's what people want. Thank you.
Okay, let's stay on 40B for a second while it's fresh in our minds. The selectmen have a specific role under law under 40B. So what, as a select person, might you do if a developer did propose a poorly designed and unpopular project? What steps would you take and what position would you take if such a project came to light? Ms. Van Tuin, we'll start with you.
So I was taught a long time ago that if I don't know an answer, I should say I don't know an answer. But I was also taught to ask a lawyer. So if somebody came to the Board of Selectmen indicating that there is a hostile 40B, and I say hostile because typically they're not coming to say, hey, we really want to work with the town and make this, some developers do, but some come in and say, I'm going to do my X number and there isn't anything you can do about it. And I understand that there are some things that the Board of Selectmen can do, but what they really should do is they should contact counsel for the town to make sure that they don't say the wrong thing, because there are certain things that they're not allowed to do. So my answer is I would call town council.
Always defer to town council. Jackie, same question to you. Do you need me to read it back?
No.
Okay.
So I think that the job of the select board in this case would be to work with a developer to figure out how to make the 40B work for us. And this has happened across town. So I'll give you an example from Medfield, but 40B developers came in, they wanted to build this enormous project that was going to be 7 stories tall at its highest. This was going to be near the center of town. And they worked with the 40B developer because they had a good faith effort to work with them. And I think that on our part, we have to approach these conversations with a good faith effort that we want this development to go in, but we want it to work for our town. So in the Medfield example I gave, they created 3-story buildings, but spread them out around a longer area. And then to ease traffic patterns, they actually moved around where the entrances would be to the development. And they adjusted the parking lot structure so that they could have more green spaces and some gardens that anybody in the town could walk through. My point is that they worked with the developer to create a place that looked like their town, that fits into their town, that for longtime residents will always know, oh, that used to be X, but it fits with the town at this point. And so I think we have to approach those interactions with a good faith effort. But I'm not interested in a developer coming in and just doing whatever they want and not actually working with the town. I don't think that's fair. And I think while we have to make these plans, we're inheriting a town that hadn't made those plans before, and that we need to protect ourselves and make sure that what's coming in fits with what we need and what we want.
Chris?
Jay, could you repeat the question?
So slightly different. So you've already spoken quite a bit about 40B in your last answer, but in a different role as a member of the Board of Selectmen, what might you do if a less popular 40B project came in?
The decision with regard to a 40B is left in the hands of the Zoning Board of Appeals. But prior to it going to the Zoning Board of Appeals, the town is asked to comment. As a member of the Board of Selectmen, if a project came in that the taxpayers and the residents of this town felt were unfriendly, I would do everything as selectman to make sure that Mass Housing, who actually does the initial approval to allow a 40B to come forward, knows every reason why we do not want that 40B. As a selectman, I will not negotiate with developers. It is not the role of the selectmen. Their job should be, before it ever gets to the zoning board, based on what the taxpayers and the residents of this town feel. The zoning board then will have to make the hard decision whether to approve or not approve the conditions and waivers that are necessary. But the Board of Selectmen's job should be, before it ever gets to the zoning board, to make sure they investigate it, talk to the residents of this town, talk to the abutters, and make sure that Mass Housing knows what their concerns are strongly so that these things can be avoided. Thank you.
David?
So I think that the 3 other candidates for selectmen gave very good answers to this, and I basically support everything that all 3 of them said. I would point out, as Jackie said, that it would be best for the Board of Selectmen to try to find an appropriate site for this 40B where it would not be considered unfriendly to the town. And if that turns out to be impossible, to try to work with the developer to mitigate the concerns. But as Chris accurately said, that's really the responsibility of the Zoning Board of Appeals, not the Board of Selectmen. And so it would be the role of the Board of Selectmen to sort of pave the way for that discussion between the developer and the ZBA. The question basically confronts us with a problem. I mean, the question said, what will you do if this potentially hostile 40B is presented to the town, and we should be proactive and try to prevent that from happening in the first place by talking to developers and trying to encourage development that is in fact acceptable to the town.
Thank you, David. There's a question for Ms. Van Tine. Ms. Van Tine, you are a very busy lawyer. And your attendance as a member of the Board of Assessors was not great. How will you manage the demands of being a select person?
So I'm going to back up for a second and say that my attendance was top-notch as the moderator. I was also involved with the moderator technology committee of David's. My attendance was top-notch as on the advisory. I don't think I ever missed a meeting or a town meeting. I was unfortunate enough at the beginning of my tour as assessor, and it wasn't horrible, but there were some issues with my attendance at the Board of Assessors, and I'm going to tell you about them. I was running on our less than ideal roads about 3 months after I joined the Board of Assessors, and right around the time that I'd learned that sometimes they were going to have meetings that weren't actually after work. And I was run off the road by a car and rolled down the embankment. It was fairly bloody and ended up with injuries that required surgery. And that surgery resulted in, I think, 8 weeks of no weight bearing, plus several weeks of working from my bed, much to my husband's thrill. And that impacted some attendance, but also what impacted some attendance was a few times, and actually, it's funny, I saved the emails because I was so aggravated by them, because I like to make it to things. And when I first signed on to the Board of Assessors, I had said, I work 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, and sometimes I can work from home as long as I know in advance. And they said, that'll be no problem, right? We do it all the time. Great. And one of the times that I missed, they emailed me and said, can you do day 8 or days X or day Y? And I said, I can do day X. And right on day X, they said, well, we can't do day X, it's going to be day Y. And a few weeks later, they said, we need to have a meeting at 4:30. And I said, I can get there at 4:30, I can get there at 6, when you told me I could get there. And they said, well, it has to be 4:30. And I think one or two of the others had to do with the doctor's appointments. But I don't tend to get run off the road again, although I was running down the roads again today, had a little PTSD. And I do work in the city, but I can, as you know from seeing me today at your moderators meeting, I can manage my schedule as long as I know what's happening in advance. So if someone's going to email me on a Tuesday and say, hey, we need you to show up tomorrow at 4:30, I'm not going to be able to do it. But what I am going to be able to do, because there are obviously rules in place regarding scheduling, I am going to be able to make all of the meetings that are scheduled in advance. And all of the Board of Selectmen meetings are scheduled in advance. Probably 2 days a week I work from home. But again, it depends on whether or not someone's bothered to include me in their schedule.
There's a question for Jackie, but I think we'll probably ask it a similar question of the other candidates as well. Jackie, as an educator, tell us about the importance of excellent public schools in the face of competing budget priorities.
Good luck. Yeah. Man, age-old question. We've had public schools in the United States since 1789. That's why we use property taxes. That's how old this is. It actually predates our Constitution. I'm full of history facts if anyone wants to talk afterward. Now everyone's going to stay for coffee with me. This is really challenging, especially being an educator and thinking what's best for our kids in this changing world. So I'm sure you've all heard that we have no idea what we're preparing our kids for. We have no idea what the world's going to look like in 10 years, in 20 years. So my son is 15 months old. I have no idea what his life is going to be when he graduates from high school. We cannot predict the careers that are going to be there. So what we have to focus on in our schools is quality education around critical thinking skills. And the best way that we can do that, and this is what research shows, these are not personal anecdotes, it's low student to teacher ratios and teacher retention. And that's how we have good schools. And I know it sounds like it's biased because it's coming from a teacher. And so it's like, of course she wants small classes, and of course she wants good benefits. But those are things that actually do improve student achievement the most. So it's not having fancy computers, it's not having access to textbooks, it's not having an intense schedule where you're taking 5 AP classes. It's, do teachers have enough time to care about you as an individual? And I'm lucky enough to work in a district where that is the case. My classes this year are 7, 11, 12, and 23. That's it. I know every kid, I've talked to every parent, there's not a single kid who's not learning what they're supposed to be learning. At KP, we have classes up to 40. That's really hard for any teacher to connect with every kid, and when kids make those connections, they learn the skills. And so I totally understand how hard it is to invest money in our public schools. We get that money back in our property values. We get that money back in having an educated citizenry and having a population of students that are ready for whatever this world is going to throw at them. And that's what our task is as people in this town. I know there's a school committee that also will handle a lot of this, but just thinking about being an educator, I would prioritize our education, and we have to think we all benefit from our schools. So think of how much you contribute to the community now. That's a direct result of your schooling. And so I really believe in investing in public education. You get it out on the other end. You really do. And it might not feel that way in an instant, but it does over time. And so it's really important to invest in our schools, and it will improve our property values. I think a challenge that's unique to us is the fact that it's a regional school. And having traveled to the other towns while I was campaigning, I know that the values of this town are sometimes not shared with other schools, and that people don't want to share responsibility. And I think that's a challenge that exists when you have a regional school. So that's something I want to work with, but I would like to prioritize our schools, and we get a benefit on the back end with our property taxes and our property values going up. Thank you.
Chris, let's go with that same question for you. Do you need me to read it back?
Sure.
Question is, tell us about the importance of excellent public schools in the face of competing budget priorities.
I think there's no question. We want the best education we can give our kids. Plain and simple. But like every item in our budget, and I think our school budget is about 78% of our total budget, we have to look at the budget. We have to, again, go back to what I believe a zero-based budgeting model, where we justify where we're spending our money. There may be areas where we're spending it poorly in our educational system, and there may be areas where we have to increase spending. But the bottom line is, we want to provide the best education for our students in Norfolk, plain and simple.
Thank you. Cece, same question to you? Sure. Tell us about the importance of excellent public schools in the face of competing budget priorities.
So, yes, schools are important. Public schools are important, and Jackie's absolutely correct. They will define our value in the community as competing with surrounding communities. I remember when, I think I was moderator at the time, and the issue of, maybe I was on the advisory board, it was a while ago, the issue of Freeman Kennedy came up, and do we just leave the old school? And we just couldn't do it. And the reason we couldn't do it is, first of all, obviously our children are important, and the school was dilapidated, to say the least. But in addition, the town itself would not continue to rise. We would stagnate because we weren't taking care of our school system, we weren't taking care of our children. And so our regional school system, our middle and our upper school, as well as our local elementary school, to a degree, are what defines us as a community, and they need resources. That said, there is a budget, and everybody needs to work within the budget. And obviously there is a school committee in Norfolk who is top-notch and knows and can easily convey to the Board of Selectmen what it is that they need and why, and they do a wonderful job at it, and they should receive the monies that they need. And then there's KP. And often, KP's budget is wild. And we know, again, as Jackie said, that other towns aren't going to be able to support. And so what do you do? And I think that there needs to be perhaps a change of guard at that level, because our budget can only sustain so much. 78%, it's a lot of money. Yes, should there be more allocated? Sure, but I think it needs to come from what we're already taxing people. I don't think that we should be raising taxes to continue to throw money at a system that's not currently fixed. We need to fix the system, and that system is, I think, the school committee at the KP level.
David, same question.
At a discussion I was having in the town hall this afternoon, I was informed that we're paying for the Norfolk school system about $12 million a year, and our contribution to King Philip is about $9 million a year, for a total of $21 million out of a town budget of about $40 million. I hope I got that right, Todd. So clearly, schools are very important, and Jackie is certainly correct in saying that the pace of society these days is such that one can't really predict what's going to be happening in the future, what kids in school today will need to know. I have been an advocate of critical thinking skills. So a number of years ago, I sent information to the superintendent of the Norfolk school system. I also sent information to the superintendent of the King Philip's school system about how one trains students or teaches students critical thinking, which is not just, sit back and use your brains. It's much more a much more specific skill set which can be taught. And I believe at the candidates night a year ago, when we had candidates for school committee talking, after their presentations, I cornered them and also talked to them about how one teaches critical thinking skills and what programs they should be aware of. So the answer to the question is, clearly schools are very important. Clearly we don't know enough to know what we should be teaching students now, but we need to teach them the way to navigate through whatever happens. As I said earlier, there are trade-offs that need to be made, and the town needs to participate in the trade-offs. Certainly my personal decision would be to make sure that the schools are adequately funded.
David, why don't you stay right there? I'm going to ask a follow-up question for all of the candidates. We'll start with you. It's a hypothetical. King Philip is facing a severe budget shortfall and may have to cut important academic programs. Would you support an operating override under Proposition 2.5 if no other cuts could be made without losing services? Please explain.
So again, that question presents an uncomfortable situation that one shouldn't have gotten into and should have taken action to prevent. But if I remember the question correctly, you said that it was essential course material that was going to be dropped and there was no other alternative. And if that is the case, then I would support an override.
CC next, same question.
I'm going to ask you to rephrase and repeat it because I think the second part I made up.
Okay. So the hypothetical is King Philip is facing a severe budget shortfall and may have to cut academic programs. If no other cuts could be made to recover those programs, would you support an operating override under Prop 2.5?
The answer is no. I didn't hear that there were no other ways of getting the money. I heard that there were no other cuts that could be made in the budget. And the reality is, as David pointed out, if they ended up in that position, that hypothetical position, they did it of their own accord, and it would be something that we would need to fix over time. As reluctant as we have been to attach or seek monies from the stabilization fund, We have done it in the past, and we've done it for the KP schools for a similar reason, right? So I would do that again, because I think that an override is a very permanent financial detriment to the town, where seeking money from the stabilization fund and then addressing the overarching budgetary problems is a more short-term solution that saves the classes without hamstringing the townspeople with a new tax rate.
So stay right there, because I have a follow-up. It's the town council in me. So you would support using stabilization fund monies for an operating budget, not a capital item?
Yes.
Okay. Same question, Chris. Okay. So the hypothetical is that King Philip is facing a severe budget shortfall and may have to cut important academic programs. No other cuts can feasibly be made. Would you support an operating override under Prop 2.5?
I'll ask you a question. Is the cuts in the King Philip budget, is that the question, or cuts in the entire budget?
Their own budget, that they've cut it as close as they can get it, and they still have to cut the budget.
By the way, note to anybody who wants to run for public office, run for the planning board. Candidate tonight is really easy. I would not support an operational override. The question was, if the school has trimmed their budget as much as they feel they could, would I accept an override? First of all, I would hope we never get in that situation. And we should never get in that situation. But if they couldn't do it, we would have to find cuts elsewhere in the overall budget to fund it. Plain and simple. Thank you.
Jackie, same question to you.
So I think the question was very clear that no cuts could be found. And I would just challenge the question to think about how much have people really thought about the cuts that could possibly happen even in the short term. For instance, there's something called virtual high school where students can take classes online. It's obviously much cheaper than having a teacher, and it's something that students, especially high achieving students, can excel in. It's a great way if you need to cut costs for a short period of time. So just kind of the question assumes that there's no way to have cuts. And I think that sometimes that's not really true. I'm a member of a union, and I obviously work in a school. And when we're met with positions where they're telling us we might have to get an override, the override not go through, we brainstorm and think about, well, what could we cut? We know how hard it is to ask our town for more money, and we really consider what are we doing. And so another thing I'd say is talking to the union and figuring out, do they know how serious this is? And then in terms of the override, I think that's a question for the community. And I think that that's up to community members to convince the select board and the school committee on, like, well, what do we need to do? So I think what I've seen, at least in my town, in Wellesley, when my school has had to have overrides and it doesn't always go through, our select board just cut the Wellesley budget by 3.5%, which sounds little, but it's actually a lot. It was a couple full-time positions. And what I would ask is community members for what they want to show up and convince people that this is necessary. And I would go with what the town says for that moment. I don't think it's a specific decision of us. I would really want to hear what people in town want. And if you want the override, show up and convince people that it's worth it. Thank you.
Okay, we were going to lighten it up a little bit here. The town has currently banned recreational marijuana dispensaries. What is your position on this issue? Should the town continue with their ban, or should the town consider marijuana dispensaries and the financial benefits that come along with them? Let's start with Mr. Rosenberg.
I think that since marijuana dispensaries are opened in some places in Massachusetts and are opening in others, the wisest thing to do would be to observe what's happening in the other towns where dispensaries have been permitted, and then to make a decision about revoking the ban if it turns out that the dispensaries have been successful in every other place where they were built. Thank you.
Chris, same question. Oh, boy. No. I do not believe that we should remove the ban on marijuana retail stores. I don't think anybody knows the effects other than people living in Colorado and other places with the legalization of marijuana. If people want to do it, that's great. But I think there's a lot of things we haven't heard about it. There's a lot of problems associated with it. We've seen it with e-cigarettes, where we're starting to see younger kids starting to smoke e-cigarettes at 12 years old, and eventually we know where they're going to go with that. So I think it's a mistake. And I'll give you a real-life example. As I run a commercial roofing company, one day 2 of our employees were driving to a job, and the driver of our vehicle handed the passenger a packet of marijuana and his, I'll call it a bowl, I guess that's what you call it. And he said, "Hey, pack this for me." And he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "It's legal. I can smoke while I drive, working for a commercial company." The young people don't understand. It's no different from alcohol. We shouldn't allow it. And I don't think Norfolk should allow it. I think we're going to find out as time goes on that some of these other communities are experiencing a lot of the problems that Colorado has right now, but that are not being published. Thank you. Jackie?
I'll say what I said at the town meeting when this came up. I was much bigger back then. I was pregnant at the time, so you might not recognize me. But at town meeting, I said, just because our town doesn't have marijuana doesn't mean our kids don't have access to it. And so I think for me, bottom line is how are we educating our schools and our health programs to make sure they understand what marijuana is, what are the effects. The reason we don't have research on it is because it was legal. And now there are studies coming out, and over the next 10 years, there are going to be a lot of studies on the use of marijuana and how it affects people. I think it's a different issue from e-cigarettes. E-cigarettes are purposely marketed as having cotton candy flavors. They're purposely being marketed to kids. They're sold over the counter, and it is a completely different way than the way marijuana would be regulated. That said, I completely respect what the town decided, both in the popular vote and at town meeting. I thought there was a debate, the town made a decision, and I think if that's something that people want to revisit, they can bring that up at town meeting, they can bring that up to select board, and then I'd like to hold some forums to hear what people say. I think that it would be really nice to have the revenue, but as David said, it would make a lot of sense to make sure that that's actually happening based on what's happening in other towns. But I just think it's a mistake to think that if our town doesn't have it, that somehow means our kids are safe. Our kids are safe because we help them understand what this drug is. Our kids are safe because it is regulated across the entire state. That's why our kids are safe. It's the same thing we do with alcohol. And so I think in the end, our kids are going to be able to get access to the drugs that they want, and we have to teach them how to handle it responsibly and why it's not safe for them to do, because I think there's a marijuana shop opening up in Millis. They're close. We're not protected because we don't have them. We have to face this as a community and decide how are we going to help our kids navigate this world. But I think on the issue of marijuana shops, I think that's left up for the town to decide, and I would love to hear community voices on both sides of the issue.
So I'm mindful of the fact that a marijuana shop would bring in revenue. But I also know from the shops that surround, from the folks that have already opened, that the revenue is really de minimis compared to other commercial enterprises. And so it's my opinion that there really would not be much of a tax advantage to the town to have a marijuana shop within the borders of the town. Similarly, I also believe in free enterprise, and I like the idea of people being able to do what they want with respect to business. That said, I absolutely do not support a marijuana shop within the borders of Norfolk. And I think that if people want to open a shop, they can find another community who is a little more open-minded, for lack of a better term, than we. And I don't agree that that vaping or e-cigarettes is very different than what would happen in a marijuana shop, because marijuana is being boiled down and the oils are being extracted and it's being put in gummy bears and in Starburst and in candy and in chocolate, and you can have a bar of chocolate and get high, and just the same way as as e-cigarettes are being marketed to kids, all of the edibles are being marketed to everybody. In addition, already in towns like Lowell, and I believe it happened in Worcester and a few other communities, the folks running these stores, or at least working in these stores, have been selling to minors. And they've been getting arrested, but not before they've sold to a few minors. And it's not okay to sell drugs to minors. It's just not. And so they've sold to them, and they're not selling them at the rate that they're selling them to someone who is 40. They're upping the price, and that's why they're doing it. They're willing to sell out the back door to kids because they can, instead of selling the same chocolate bar for $20, they can sell it for $40. And so if it's so important for people to get access to edibles, they can go somewhere else. I absolutely do not support it in Norfolk.
Just stay right there. We're going to change topics. While I have
That's
you
fun.
I think this is all fun. All right, so we've mentioned a couple times the public safety building. What are your thoughts on the ongoing public safety building projects, given the cost overruns? Would you support additional debt to finish these projects?
So I was shaking my head. I'll do the second portion of it first and then tell you my thoughts. I'd be really reluctant to support additional debt. And I'm always trying to say never, because somebody will always come up with some great reason. But the reality is, we incurred a lot of debt to do the safety building. I can't remember, it was like 17 million, or it was a lot. And I'm trying not to swear because I know we're on television and there's small people in the audience, but do I think that it's going well? I don't. I think it's fill in the expletive show. I think it's ridiculous that the police station that is now over by Route 1A is already $2 million over budget, and all of the costs haven't come in. I think it's ridiculous that we had an architect not come out and look at the roof. And so we have somewhere between 450 and 500,000 of that 2 million because of the roof. I think it's ridiculous that we would ever even consider using the same architect to do anything other than collect trash. So no, I think the fact that the fire department is going to potentially be out and only be able to use what's left, the $2 or $3 million left of the $5 or $6 million they were supposed to, that's now been spent on police station, and they're just going to be getting piecemeal over the next few years, I think it's ridiculous. It's outrageous. It's one of the reasons that I ran for selectman.
Jackie, same question to you.
I would also be really reluctant to go into debt. My husband's an electrician. He ran for planning board a couple of years ago. His name's Jerome Reinhardt. And so I talk with him a lot about building projects. Well, I pretend I'm listening a lot, but usually I'm cooking. But I know that a lot of this comes from poor planning. And that a lot of the problems happen and all of a sudden it feels like this problem came out of nowhere, when in reality this is something that had been a long time coming. So I would not support going into more debt for the public buildings, and I think it's a real travesty that this had to happen the way that it did. But I'm very disappointed in what I've heard over the past few years about what's happening with these public buildings, and I would not support going into more debt.
David, same question to you.
So nobody really wants public increased debt. I had a discussion about the public safety buildings with Jim Lehan either late last week or early this week, I don't remember. And he explained about problems with the architect, and about problems with construction, problems with the way the construction was being supervised. And he led me to believe that there was the possibility of seeking compensation from the architect and or the contractor. I don't know with the likelihood of that. I mean, we didn't have a super detailed discussion, and at this point it's premature, but he assured me that the problems were caused by the companies that we were dealing with, the architect and contractor, and that as everybody knows, the consequence of those problems is there is not sufficient funding to do the fire station the way it was intended. I think that at this point, I'm not knowledgeable enough about the details to want to offer an opinion about this, but I am desirous of understanding exactly what went wrong, from whom the funds can be recovered, what the likelihood of recovery is, and what the alternatives are. One of the other things is that as there is additional delay, the cost of working on the fire station increases, and that's another factor that needs to be considered. But at this point, I don't have enough details to answer.
Chris? Sure. Moment. What are your thoughts on the ongoing public safety building projects given the cost overruns? Would you support more debt to finish these projects?
As I mentioned in my opening remarks, many years ago, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, and most of you people, same people were here then, the town approved a new public safety building, a Matacomet Regional Dispatch Center, and a revamp of the fire station for the firefighters. I think the number was $14 million at that time, and not a penny more. It is disappointing that the public safety building and the MEC Center are at least probably $2 million over budget and counting. I feel bad for our new town administrator, that she's inherited this and that she will have to explain it to all of us as we go forward. I think that public safety building has to be finished. The horse is out of the barn. We have to finish it. We have to get it up and running. So we can't do much about that. But as most of us know, we have an aging population in Norfolk. And I think if I sat down with each and every one of you who was at that town meeting that year and say, really, what were you voting for? They would say the fire station, because we have one of the best fire personnel in the state. We have unbelievable emergency response. And with an aging population, that is probably the most important part of public safety. So should the fire department, should the people of Norfolk suffer because of the sins of others, I would be willing to do an override to make sure, whether it be this year, next year, explore renovating the existing fire station, or if building a new one is the right approach. But I think you get rid of the architect, you start over again with a new committee, with a new architect, you figure out what your cost is, and then you build a fire station, which is what we all approved many years ago at town meeting. Thank you.
Chris, why don't you stay right there? Question posed to you. What have you learned as chair of the zoning board that you can apply in your duties as a selectman?
First and foremost, a lot of hard work. You have to learn the facts. I've stated many times that as the chair of the zoning board, there's some weeks that you have to put in 30 to 40 hours. So you have to learn the facts. You have to learn your zoning laws and your general bylaws for the town of Norfolk. So the skills you learn is research, putting in a lot of hard work, talking to people, asking questions, talking to abutters, trying to make sure that you balance our zoning bylaws with the needs of the town of Norfolk and the people in the town of Norfolk.
Okay. Yep, thank you. So, similar question to the other three candidates. Can you tell us about your previous public service commitments and how that will help you as a member of the Board of Selectmen? Let's start with Mr. Rosenberg.
So my previous public service appointments in Norfolk, I've been a member of the Computer Study Committee, the chair of the Town Meeting Technology Committee, and currently a member of the Board of Registrars of Voters. From the Computer Study Committee, I think that I learned the necessity of working closely with the other committee members. We had, at that time, some diverse views and needed to harmonize them to come up with a recommendation that we could all agree to, a consensus recommendation. And then we had to present that. So I think that skill set of coming to consensus with people with differing views was important, and certainly would bear on my position as a selectman if I am elected. With respect to the Town Meeting Technology Committee, my experience first of all was chairing that committee, and it was an issue of making sure that it's actually also, before even chairing it, recruiting members for it. There's a difficulty in recruiting people for volunteer committees in Norfolk and in any similar town. Namely, we're asking people to give up something concrete and immediate. The concrete thing is their time. The immediate is it's this week or this month. And what we're offering them in trade for that is something intangible in the indefinite future. You know, we're going to make the town better or the town meeting better. And, you know, it'll be in 3 years or 5 years or some far out time. So there's the issue of how one gets more volunteer involvement in town that certainly is in alignment with my desire to get more citizen participation. And there was the necessity to do research and find out what other towns were doing, find out what in what ways we were constrained by state law or town bylaws. In that case, it was, I guess both town bylaws and state law were constraints, and working with other people. And lastly, my current position as a member of the Board of Registrars. It turns out that that's an actually very easy job, and the board relies very heavily on the town clerk. So one part of it is to have a relationship with the town clerk where one can rely on Carol Green to make it easy for registrars and to be available to act as a registrar when necessary. I get phone calls from Carol to come in and certify signatures, and because I am currently retired and am in town most days, it's relatively easy for me to get to the town hall and do the signature certification. And so I guess that's the skills I've accumulated in public service in Norfolk that I think are relevant. Thank you.
Susie?
Read it again, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Get the overall gist, just make sure I get all that.
Can you tell us about your previous public service commitments and how that will help you as a member of the Board of Selectmen?
So, my previous public service commitments in my mind include, I know Jackie referred to the fact that she's a teacher, I think that's right. I was an assistant district attorney for 5 years in Brockton. I was a public defender in Brockton. When I went into large law firms, I began doing my pro bono work with civil rights cases in the prisons. So I spent a lot of time before I ever moved to town in Walpole, also Susan Baranowski, still do. In addition to my volunteer position working with prisoners, I was on the prison advisory committee. That's why I thought that that would be an appropriate position for me to apply to. I know about what you can and can't wear through the security. and then come to find out I didn't actually need to go to the prison in the advisory role. Then I was on the advisory committee for several years. Then I was the moderator, also board of assessors, also NCL. I think that the global impression that I have of the work that I've done in service is that I like to help, and that, nope, I don't know everything, but that I can learn it. I'm not stupid. I can read. I'm hardworking when I'm not injured. And I can roll up my sleeves and I can learn it. Obviously, there were certain things with certain of my commitments that would dovetail nicely with the Board of Selectmen. As moderator, I was intimately aware of what was going on with the budget, what questions people had, what they cared about, what they didn't care about with respect to the budget. Advisory, the same. But globally, I think that my service just is the fact of my willingness to work for my community, for my friends and my family, rolling up my sleeves and learning whatever it is that needs to be learned in order to be an effective member of whatever community or committee that I'm involved with.
Jackie.
So as a teacher, I think I have a couple of skills that I really refined over the years. If you know a teenager, they don't really like listening to you. I'm a really good listener because teenagers really just want people to listen to them. And what I learned on the campaign trail was that people just want people to listen to them and really understand them. And I think I'm good at listening, not just hearing people. I think I have a lot of skills in empathy. I think that's important when you work in government, to be able to understand how the constituents feel and not to intellectualize everything so it just becomes a series of numbers, that you really see people as people. I think, and I hope you've seen, that I'm good at communicating and breaking down information into manageable parts. That's literally all you do when you're a high school history teacher, is take something complicated and make it digestible. And I think that that's a skill that's really important. Also, research. Again, as a history teacher, you spend a lot of time researching, and that's something that this job would require a lot of. And I think that this is really my first foray into public service. I've lived in Norfolk for only about 4 years, and I would really love the chance to represent you and to serve your interests, but I do definitely am impressed by all the experience of the people to my right. I just haven't had as many opportunities as they have, and so I would hope that I could start to build the resumes of these very impressive people that I just heard. Thank you.
Next question. I think we have time for maybe this one, maybe one more after this. We'll see. Seems like everyone probably had enough. What is your experience with union negotiations, and how would you approach union negotiations with the various unions of Norfolk employees? Ms. Van Tine, start.
So I have no experience with union negotiations. I do have experience with negotiations, however. I am a divorce attorney, and at least once a week, if not more than once a week, I'm in what's called a four-way. And a four-way conference, it's not as sassy as it sounds. A four-way conference is two lawyers. Stephen McDonough is like, woo, good one. That's right. That joke's for you, Stephen. A four-way conference is two divorce attorneys and two incredibly wounded clients in a room trying to negotiate the next however many years of their life, right? The rest of their life. How are they going to parent their children? Who's going to have access to what? How are they going to be able to afford everything? Making sure all of the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed so that there's no questions 10, 15, 20 years from now about college, et cetera, et cetera. And I do that very well. And I would imagine that any negotiation, union or otherwise, is the same sort of component parts of just treating people respectfully, understanding where they're coming from, keeping your knees flexed to the fact that, while it seems like someone may be pugnacious, really they're just worried about how they're going to afford to eat, to send their kid to school. And that would be my focus.
Chris, same question.
I actually, in 1992, negotiated the school union's contract with the teachers in Bellingham, Mass. So I have a little bit of experience negotiating with the school system. It was a very good negotiation, and actually both sides came out well. Mark Twain once said that if everybody leaves a negotiation feeling like they didn't do too well, it was a good negotiation. I think negotiations, whether it be union or non-union, just require people to listen. Listen to the other side, see what they need, talk to them, and be reasonable. There are going to be times when one party wants to leave the room and discuss things by themselves, but it really means just people coming together, trying to find common goals, and then deciding what can really happen, what can be done within our budget constraints. Thank you.
David?
I haven't had experience with union negotiations, but as I mentioned during my introductory remarks, I got involved with mediation and negotiation and have been following that. In particular, there's a program on negotiation that's run by a consortium of Harvard, MIT, and Tufts, and has its physical headquarters on the Harvard Law School campus. I've been a participant in a number of events in connection with that program, and also in what they call simulations at the Harvard Kennedy School. I've had roles such as, one role was the Minister of Electricity for Afghanistan. Other roles were as the advisor to the chair of the Senate Committee on, I don't exactly remember, but I've had experience doing these simulating negotiations. The Harvard approach generally is described as win-win negotiations, where, in fact, instead of both sides feeling that they didn't come out as well as they could have, the goal is for both sides to feel that they won. And the general approach to doing that is to try to go beyond their original positions, to find what the underlying interests are that motivate those positions, and be creative in coming up with a way to satisfy as best as possible the underlying interests that they have. I think that skill set that I've developed would apply to any negotiation. Thank you.
Jackie?
So as I mentioned before, I'm a member of a union, the MTA in Wellesley. So I've been on that side of the union negotiations, and I think everybody else articulated a lot of what union negotiations are about. I'll just say unions emerged when businesses tried to take advantage of people. That's when they emerged. They're just meant to balance the scales. They're not meant to be something horrible. And I think that if there's good faith on both parties, negotiations can go really well. The one exception I'd say would be really hurt feelings that sometimes have manifested over 20 years. And I think that that's something to consider when you're talking about any sort of union negotiation. You're coming into a situation where there might be people that had a lot of history, a lot of bad blood, and figuring out how to navigate that. And, being on the teacher end, it can feel a lot like the town is always trying to cut our budget and make us do more work for less. But then when I talk to the town, and we talk to school committee, and we talk to the select board, the bigger picture is always made clear to me about why these things are happening. So a few years ago, we had to pay more for healthcare, and the message was healthcare is more expensive. It is what it is. And we didn't go on strike. We didn't fight back against it. We said, okay, this is a good faith effort. Everyone's doing what they can do, and everyone's going to walk away. I'll do the opposite of everybody else, feeling like they lost a little something. So they did. Everyone feels good. Everyone feels like they gave nothing. And this is maybe feeling like you lost a little something, but not everything. And I'd say that that's how I would approach working with unions.
I think after putting everyone through about 2 hours of this, it might be a good stopping point. I think all the candidates, I believe, will be joining us right in the cafeteria, and we can pepper them a little bit more on some of the more fine-tuned questions. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It's a good turnout tonight. Thank you, NCL. Thank you for all of the candidates.